Hello, everyone. It is Debbie DeGroat, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm so excited about this topic, and it's a really important topic as we move into 2019, and we notice that some of our listings are taking a little bit longer to sell, and they may require 1, 2, or even 3 price reductions. So this is a big topic, and I'm glad you joined us. So I see, hello, Melissa is here, which is awesome. Thank you, Melissa, for typing that in. We always like to make sure that you guys can hear us. So please feel free to type in a quick hello. Tell us where you're from. I see Dan. Good afternoon, Dan. So since you're saying good afternoon, I know you must be on the East Coast, Dan. So thanks for joining us. And I just want to make sure that if you have any technical difficulties, you know you can type a note in the chat box. My daughter, Taylor DeGroat, and president of the company here at Excellium, is monitoring the chat box to help you. And you may try refreshing your browser. And also, it usually works best if you're in Google Chrome. That's usually the best to get the full advantage of the webinar. Now, what we're going to do, Taylor's going to man the chat box for technical questions, but I certainly want you to feel free as we go through this webinar today to type in any questions you have for me. Oh my goodness, I see someone expecting 12 inches of snow. So will this be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded. But guys, I want to encourage you, if you can, stay on with us until the end, because we're going to pack this with a lot of great information. I want you to be able to engage live, ask your questions. And I also want to make sure that you actually hear this webinar. And I know sometimes you have good intentions of going back to the recording and just don't get around to it. So let's stay together live if we can. All right. So I really am always excited to see all the people that I know well and that follow us at events and webinars. I want to say welcome back. We do have a lot of new people today that registered for the webinar. We actually expect well over 1,000 people to join us today. And so for those of you that I have not met before, I wanted to share a little bit about my bio and why I feel I'm very qualified to talk about this topic with you. See, when I got into real estate at the age of 18, I got into the business at a time when the market was pretty good. It was pretty stable. Rates were fine. Things were going along good. And then just a very short few months into my career, everything started to change. Fixed rates started to rise. In fact, in the span of about a year, they went from 8 or 9% to 18%. So over my career, my 16-year career, I closed over 3,000 transactions in LA and Orange County. And I worked through several down cycles in the market, and I mean severe down cycles. My husband, Don, is full-time in the real estate business, still very active, top producer over 34 years. He has worked through several down cycles. So we're a real estate family. So we've lived through it. We're not saying that the market is crashing. Please don't think that. It's just that we have had the experience with shifting markets. So I had to become good at it or I couldn't get my listings sold. So I'm going to share things that are not theory, but they actually work. They have worked for all of our top elite agents that we coach. And I hope you'll be able to take some great things away from the call today. So now, as we move on, I wanted to share a few gifts that we're going to send to you. And there's nothing you have to do at all to get these gifts. So first of all, the script for setting the expectation. Now, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that, but we'll talk more about that in a few moments. What I'm noticing is happening as we work with our great clients across the nation is sellers are listing their homes and then expecting 2 or 3 days later that they're going to have multiple bids, full price offers, you know, all the stuff that's been going on over the last few years that may or may not happen for them due to the slight shift in the market. So we want to educate them. And I've written a really great script for you guys. Our clients are using it and succeeding with it. That's going to come to you automatically along with a copy of this recording. And it's especially important to get you the recording because we're going to go pretty fast and we're going to cover a lot of different scripts and dialogues. So that's going to be a good gift for you. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to offer you a way if you would like to speak to me about how coaching can work for you in 2019. I have opened up in my schedule a few spaces next week. And the first few people that register, I want to actually speak to you myself. So, I have coaches on standby to talk to you, but if you'd like to speak with me, I have opened up some spaces next week. So let's get to work. Some of the awesome clients that we have, you guys have heard me talk about maybe before on webinars that you've attended. One of our great guys, Ernie Carswell. Ernie's in Beverly Hills. Ernie just sold the Brady Bunch house not long ago. That required some pretty crazy negotiations. Katy Perry and Fergie are two of his clients. And not long ago, I was working with him on price reduction strategies on Katy Perry's house that he just recently sold. So it isn't easy, right? Even for somebody like Ernie, 25 years in the business, probably a couple $100 million in sales volume, but it's not easy to go to these sellers and to tell them that their property is not worth what they were hoping it was worth. So I just want you to know that if you struggle with this part of it, then it's just normal, right? But we've got to master this skill of pricing and price reductions, because when you do, you will shine in a shifting market and you will get your listing sold. Boris is another great example. We often talk about Boris because he's very successful, and yet he found that one of the things to close the gap between the income he was earning and the income he wanted to earn wasn't about more hours. It was about finer development of his skills of communicating and negotiating with his clients. So I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the things he did in a bit. So let's look at the 3 secrets revealed today. How to never lose a listing again due to price. How to manage your seller expectations, because I don't want them attacking you when you're only a week into the listing and they're so upset because it hasn't sold. And then we're going to go through some scripting on how to have the price reduction conversations with even your toughest sellers. So as I often start out my webinars, let's make a deal. All right. So here's the deal. I promise to give you as much as I possibly can in our very short time together. And all I ask is that you promise me that you'll find 2 or 3 great takeaways that you'll take out there into the field and put into action. Because let's face it, you're busy and you invested your time to be here today. So I want you to go out there and I want you to take this great information and I want you to do something with it. Now, it's going to be even easier on this webinar to take something out into the field, because your very next listing appointment, I want you to promise me that as soon as you get that listing signed, you're going to use that setting the expectation script, because I feel that's going to be a real game changer for you. So again, I'll be watching the chat box. So please go ahead as we go through our talk today, type in questions. And if I cannot answer your question, I will answer it later for you. All right, so shifting market, right? So while much of the market is still red hot, there are some segments where offers and prices are dropping or shifting, and days on market is increasing. Now, I love this kind of market. So let's get in the right mindset, first of all. Why is this a great market for you? Well, first of all, when the houses don't sell overnight, they know they need a good agent. They're much more mindful of their selection of a real estate agent. And they're also more willing to pay more to get your help when they know how much they need you. So that's a good thing, because just an order taker won't work. They've got to have a quality agent. Also, when you have buyers, now you actually have properties to show your buyers. I notice a good friend of mine, Steve Marquez, is on the webinar, and Steve and I go way back. We sold real estate together many, many years ago. And one of the things that Steve probably remembers is 1985. What a fabulous year that was in real estate. See, fixed rates had been 14 and then 12, and then they dropped down. I think they were around 9%. And it was really a market just like this, where things took anywhere from 30 to 45 days to sell. Buyers would make a little bit lower offer, but they were reasonable. Sellers would negotiate. And man, that was a beautiful year. So please don't be afraid. It's going to be fine. You just have to develop your skills. Because here's the thing. Sellers are greedy, and they will not want to acknowledge the facts. I talk about it as the stages of grieving. So denial, it's not happening. It's not happening. I don't believe it, right? And they're kind of in that stage right now. Then anger. Why isn't my house sold? What are you doing wrong? Just do some more marketing. It's your fault, right? They kind of go through that anger, and then ultimately acceptance. So one of the things we're going to talk about in a few minutes is the seller servicing. Because if you're not communicating with your sellers, if you're not setting those expectations, if you're not keeping them informed of what you're doing for them, they're going to get angry. And we don't want to have that, right? But we do know that we're right now in the stage of denial. So we have to be very careful. When you go into your listing presentations, if you go in there like the angel of death, the bringer of bad news, guess what, guys? They're not going to list with you. So I'm not telling you at all to misrepresent or to lie or be dishonest about what's happening in the market. Just be careful that you don't come across negative, okay? Because it's going to cost you the listing. And I know, because this happened to me, in the early 90s in California, we had a real market crash. And I really wanted to do the right thing. And I was well informed and educated. And I would go in with my stats and my data. And I would sit down with my sellers and I would tell them all these things about the market. And suddenly I noticed that my listing taken ratio went from over 90% to under 50%. And I thought, well, okay, but they overpriced the property. And maybe I didn't want it. But then I watched it and I noticed, well, but that agent that they listed with, they ultimately reduced it and got it sold. And I thought, wait a minute, maybe I need to dial back my aggressiveness in beating them up with the fact that the dangers of overpricing are many, because guess what? They were shooting the messenger, right? They were choosing not to list with me, even though I was giving them accurate information. So we don't want to lie, certainly don't want to be dishonest or promise things you cannot deliver, but we must be mindful and skillful in how we handle pricing, price reductions, and offer negotiations. I know you may hate this part of the job. Learn to love it. Learn to love it. Because if you think about your listings, they're kind of like stock on your shelf. And if we have it sitting there getting dusty, eventually expiring, just like vitamins expire, eventually expiring, it's a waste of your time and energy. And if you want to motivate yourself to make those seller calls, do the math. If you can get that property reduced and sold, how much revenue is sitting there on the shelf? And I just did this with an agent this morning. we were looking at their listing inventory, and we did a calculation that they had about $40,000 worth of revenue sitting on the shelf. And all they need to do to get that off the shelf is call those sellers and have that heart to heart. Okay, so learn to love it. It's money waiting there for you. And quite frankly, we owe it to those sellers. And when you're good at this, it's going to give you more power in your marketplace, because you're going to become known as the agent that gets their listings sold. And you know, no matter what's going on in a market, people still buy houses. You know, when the fixed rate market was 18%, if the property was priced right and marketed properly, it still sold. And sometimes inside of 30 days. So this is really owning your power of being a great negotiator. Now let's talk then a little bit more about how to never lose another listing again due to price. So let's face it, right now, price is a moving target, okay? I don't know, right? Dawn and I recently sold our house in Huntington Beach. We lived there for 24 years. You know, we're veterans of the real estate industry. We're in touch and in tune with the market. And yet we still didn't know, you know, what is exactly the perfect price? Because the real estate market is a lot like the stock market. It goes up and down every day. So please don't go into a listing and be so adamant that you tell that seller, this is what the price needs to be. Honestly, guys, how do we know, right? So we know within a range. We certainly have all the data and information, but don't be so attached to that price, because it is a moving target. You know, I was talking to an agent yesterday, and they said, I went in on a listing appointment and I told the seller, absolutely, your home will not sell for a penny more than this. And guess what? Seller pushed him, had him price it a little bit higher, and it sold $20,000 higher than the agent said it would. So it kind of lost a little credibility with the seller. Or has this ever happened to you, where the seller says, well, Debbie, do you think this price is good that we picked and listed the home for today? Oh, yes, I think it's a good price. I think we're right on. And then the market rejects the price. And now you have to go back to the seller, and the seller says, whoa, wait a minute. You promised me. So guys, don't be too attached to a particular price. It's a moving target, and it depends on the pockets in the market. Now, they're going to go online. You know they will. They're going to go to Zillow, maybe Trulia, Realtor.com. They're going to go online and they're going to check out their values, and they're going to educate themselves before you get there. So you need to go online and see what they're seeing. Now, it may not be accurate, but you still need to know, what are they seeing? Now, we also need to realize we only have so much power to persuade them. Am I right? And let's face it, I had to really hold myself back as a seller, even though I'm a well-informed seller. You know, we are a real estate family. I had to hold myself back from overpricing my own house. It's a natural tendency, right? So yes, you can guide them, counsel, and persuade. But bottom line, for the most part, they're going to do what they want to do. And then you're going to have to decide in a business decision, does it make sense for you to take that listing or not? Okay, but you do have a lot of power to persuade. All right, so we need to be a student of the market so we can be more persuasive. Study the statistics. Keep up with the trends. And some markets, you do have seasonal changes. So we have to be aware of that. And we want to know the demand for houses in any given area. So we might find that in one pocket market, we have to be very careful about where we're pricing. And yet in another pocket, probably a more bread and butter price range, they're still selling like hotcakes. So we can push the envelope. So study your MLS stats, talk about it with your broker, your office, read industry publications, be well informed. All right. So what's the single biggest reason that home sellers delay the decision to list with you after you've made a presentation? It's how pricing was handled. Either they didn't like it, they didn't agree, they didn't believe it, they want to call others in and get other opinions. And that's why this piece is so critical. And it's critical now more than ever. So you may have to take it higher than you want and work it. Let's just get that out there on the table. This may be the year that you're going to take some on and you're going to know that you took it a little higher than you wanted to. So what I'd suggest that you do is set some standards for when you're going to take what you might consider an overpriced listing. So going back to what I was sharing with you about when I noticed my ratio had dropped to under 50%, and I realized I couldn't take such a hard line. But I thought, on the other hand, I don't want to take a bunch of stuff that sucks up my time, my energy, money, and never ever sells. So I thought I need to develop my own internal standards for when I would take a listing higher than I thought it should be. So I'll share with you what my standards were, but you guys will want to create your own. So first of all, I thought they have to be motivated. So even if it's maybe 2, 3, 4 months down the road before that motivation really kicks in, they need to be motivated. Because if they just don't care, they're just throwing it out there and testing the market, and it's really high, that's probably not a seller I want. The next thing I looked at was, how difficult are they? So are they logical? Are they reasonable? Are they going to be easy for me to work with? Because I might have to spend a little bit of extra time with them over a number of weeks or months. So if they're really going to beat me up every day and they're overpriced and they're not that motivated, this is probably not one that I want. Also, looking at the property, there are certain properties, if it's backing to the freeway and facing the prison, it better be priced right. You know what I'm saying? Because in a shifting market, any location problem or severe condition problem is going to have a dramatic effect on the saleability. So location and condition, had to take a look at that. And then last but not least, I thought I need to develop a ratio. My standard, will I go 5% above where I feel it needs to be, or 10% above where I feel it needs to be? And I set that ratio in a sense to create an accountability. If they didn't meet my checklist, motivation, reasonable to deal with, decent property without any major issues, and at least within 10% of where I thought it should be, okay, now I'll take it, or no, I won't take it. All right, guys? So set your own standards so that you will not get caught up in the moment and you'll hold yourself accountable. Now, of course, they're not going to list with you if they don't feel that you will champion their value. So please eliminate the words, well, we can try it, or we'll try it. They don't like that. Instead, remind them that you're their business partner. You have every motivation and every reason to fight for them, to fight to sell that house at the highest possible realistic price. And let them know that you're going to do everything you can to ensure that no money is left on the table. And then after we do all of that, if the market is rejecting the price, then we're going to have a talk about what we'll do next. But see, they really want to feel like you're all in. So be honest, but also be enthusiastic, right? Because they want to list with somebody that's going to go to the mat for them. I'd also encourage you to be very careful about how you discuss repairs and improvements. Because I see every day agents telling me, well, I won't say every day, but literally every week, somebody tells me about a listing they lost because how they handled the discussion of repairs. Has this ever happened to you? All right. So you're walking in the hall with the seller, and the seller says, hey, Julie, what do you think I should do to the house before we sell it? And Julie thinks they really want to know, right? So Julie starts giving good advice. Well, I think we should paint here and probably should get the carpets cleaned, and maybe we'll want to bring in a stager. And then Julie finds out later that she lost the listing because she said something that offended them. Or she lost the listing because they didn't want to do anything and they got overwhelmed and distressed. So be very careful how you handle that conversation. And in fact, my suggestion to you would be, instead of answering in the hallway, why don't you try saying this? I'm curious, do you want to do some things to the property if you felt it would potentially net you a higher value, or do you prefer to sell the property as is? Oh, yes, Julie, I don't want to do a thing. I would rather sell it as is. Okay, then when we sit down and discuss pricing, we'll keep that in mind. Well, I don't know, Julie, I might do some things. Well, then let's do this. Let's sit down in a few moments and discuss your price expectation. Then we can kind of back into what we might need to do to support that. And then, by the way, before I leave, if you're willing to do some items to the home, once the property is listed, I'm going to go outside with you. We'll start at the curb and we will walk all the way back through the home and we'll make our list. Because see, now once they hire me, now I can do that with them and I'm not going to lose the listing, right? Now, here's another thing that often happens. They tell you, give me a few days, give me a couple weeks to work on it. Then I'll list with you. And hey, I need your vendors. I need a painter. I need a contractor. I need a plumber. And you start giving up all these quality vendors. I need your stager. They suck up all your vendors and then they list with somebody else. Don't give them up. Now, I know there could be circumstances where you have no choice, but instead try to get them to sign the listing with whatever is required to hold it off the market. And as you help them prepare, tell them that your quality vendors prefer to work directly with you. And they prefer to coordinate all work that they do for your sellers directly through you. So, Mr. Seller, when you engage me as your agent, then I will go to my quality vendors. I'll get that arranged for you, and I will help you organize that and decide what to do and what not to do. So please don't be so quick to give up those quality vendors. You know that old saying, right? They don't buy the cow if they get the milk for free. I'm not sure that applied, originally was meant to apply to real estate vendors, but it just kind of works. All right, so I want to stop for just a second, and I just want to see, hold on, guys, I'm going to grab my glasses here. So Steve says, one thing I've learned is since 1979, when I got my license, sellers always want us to get them top dollar and pay us as little as possible, just paraphrasing there a little bit, Steve. And Steve's right. Here's the thing though, guys, they're always going to ask. Probably if we were going to list our house today and we weren't in real estate, we would ask. Think about it this way. If you go to a garage sale and you see something really cool, like, wow, that's an antique watch. I know that thing is worth a lot of money. And you see a $10 sticker on it and it's worth 10 times that, you still probably would say, is this your best price? Just because you think you should. See, your sellers think that they need to ask you for a cut. Doesn't mean they won't pay more. Be prepared for it. And utilize the power of your reviews. So gather all your reviews together that talk about how you got them over full price, how you sold the home for more. Get those reviews together, make that part of your listing presentation. Track your listing sold value compared to the average agent. So here's what I mean. Are the average agents in your market selling their listings at 94% of list price, and you're selling yours at 98% of list price, and you're only asking 1% more on the commission, right? So we have to be able to quantify the value. So it's important. Keep working on your commission objection handlers. And then really emphasize this proactive marketing. Now, here's what I mean by proactive marketing. So we all go in and show them the things we do, the online portals, the internet, the brochures, all of that stuff. I was with a group of top producing agents, though, the other day, and someone in the audience asked these top producing agents who happen to be in luxury markets. And they said, wow, luxury sellers really often demand a lot of expensive marketing. So how do you avoid spending tens of thousands of dollars to meet their demands? And they said, we emphasize proactive marketing, how we're going to reach out to our database, how many calls a day we're going to make, the type of pre-launch and fabulous open houses that we're going to hold, how we're going to reach out to our industry connections, targeted Facebook ads to attract their right buyer. So make sure that as you're talking about the marketing, they really feel that you're going to go above and beyond to find the right buyer for their home. Now, as we're at our listing appointment, and especially as we're talking about price, don't pitch, don't preach. Instead, engage them in the conversation. Many of us on the call today are veterans on the webinar, because I know you guys, and some of you have been in the business 20 and 30 years. We remember back in the day when the consumer had no access at all to data about property values. We held the keys to the kingdom. So we would take a handwritten sheet of paper in where we would write the listings, the sales, the pendings. We would put that in front of the seller, and it was the gospel. And they had to believe us. But guess what? Those days are gone, right? So you might as well engage them in the pricing conversation. So the old-fashioned days of pitching and telling them exactly what to do, it's probably not going to work so well for you. So also, we want to eliminate conflict in any way we can, because 70% of the time you don't win a listing, it may simply be because you were not in rapport, right? They didn't agree, they didn't feel comfortable, you didn't have their buy-in. So we want to do anything we can to eliminate conflict. So let me give you an example what I mean. I prefer as an agent to make them review marketing first because I'm establishing my value. But guess what? They may not want to do that. They may prefer to go right to pricing. So let's don't have conflict. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would you like to review the marketing or the pricing first? Now, if they ask you, we're fine with either one. What do you think is best? Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to review the marketing. It's going to help you understand how we're going to arrive at the highest realistic price possible. Some of you guys who have joined me before on webinars, you've heard me say this, stop using the word comp. Guess what, guys? They don't think their home comps to anything. They think their home is better than the neighbors. How many times have you ever said, your home comps to X? And they say, no, it doesn't. They argue, right? So why would we even break rapport? Don't even use that word anymore. Instead, say, let's take a look at the data that the buyers will be reviewing when they make a decision to view or buy your home, right? Same difference, just a different word. No conflict. Now, here's another place where we might have a breach in rapport and we might offend them. So let's say as we're going over the data, I say, well, you know, Mr. Seller, you're on this really busy street, and that's going to really have a negative impact in values. It's going to really drive that price down. How's that make them feel? Now, we know it's true. They even know it's true. But remember, that doesn't make us sound like the champion of their value. Why don't you just ask them? So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know we've now reviewed the data. May I ask you, what do you feel a buyer might try to use against us? Well, they're probably going to say the busy street. You know, Mr. Seller, you're right. That's a negative. Absolutely. And yet I'll tell you what, I'm going to work overtime to make sure that we have enough exposure that we're going to find that buyer that's okay with it. And we're going to be mindful of this as we price the home to get the highest realistic price possible, considering the location. And remember, you bought the home. There is a buyer out there that will buy this home on a busy street. So you see what I mean, guys? Get them to say what the negative is. You acknowledge it, but you show them that you're going to fight for them because remember, that's what they want. Now, they also want to tell you what they have most enjoyed. Let them. And again, that's part of this engaging and interactive conversation. You know, what are the features you've most enjoyed? Give me that transfusion. I want to use that to drive the values as high as I possibly can. You see why they might love it? And again, keeping in mind, we're going to have determined in advance how high we're willing to go before we say, this doesn't make sense. I'm going to tell you something that I used to do, and it really helped me. I sat down and I figured out what's my average spend on a listing. And at the time I figured out it was around $1,200 by the time all was said and done, hard cost, etc. And that included my assistant's time to work on it. I kind of calculated about 9 hours of my time in there. So I knew that every listing with time, money spent was going to be about $1,200 back in the day. So I would sit in my car. I would get out my checkbook. So I'm in front of the listing. I wrote a check to the seller. So I'd write a check to, Mr. Smith, $1,200. I would tear it out of my checkbook and I would put it in my purse because I wanted to be sitting at that table thinking, I'm investing $1,200 of my time, money, and energy. Is this listing going to give me back a fair return on my investment? Now, sometimes it might be that I don't know if it's going to sell, but I have a strategy. I want to get into that neighborhood. I think I might pick up buyers because it'll be a big, hot, open house. That's okay, right? That's a business decision that's going to produce a return on my investment. But I don't want to just take anything and have all these listings sucking up my time and energy. So remember, engage them in the pricing discussion and decision. One of the things I like to do is talk to them about strategies. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, now that we've reviewed the data, let's talk about the pricing strategies. Strategy number 1, some of our homeowners want to price their property as close to the data as possible, or so that they can sell it faster and also make sure that we have an appraisal that comes in at full value. So that's a strategy. Strategy number 2. Some of our clients prefer, we call it the less is more strategy. So they'll actually price below where they feel the data might be, knowing that they'll do a good pre-launch, drive a lot of traffic, and then we may hold offers for a week or so, hoping to get multiple bids. And that can be a very effective strategy. Strategy number 3, some of our clients like what I refer to as the retail pricing strategy, where we price the house as high as we feel the market may bear, knowing that if the market doesn't accept our price, we may have to adjust it. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based on your situation and timeline, which of these strategies do you feel make the most sense for you? See, what you've done is you've now tenderized them to this pricing discussion. You're recognizing that they're smart people. You're acknowledging that they have an opinion. And now you're asking them, which strategy do you prefer? Now, guys, remember, it doesn't take away your power to persuade, to discuss with them, but let's get that out on the table. And they may have perfectly valid opinions and decisions. Ask them, what price do you feel you would like to begin with? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to agree. You could still counsel them as their wise advisor. But again, you're engaging them, therefore you're eliminating conflict and you're tenderizing them. And we want to always be reminding how we're going to be fighting for that highest realistic price. But don't overassure them. Don't overpromise them anything other than you certainly can promise them the diligence that you're going to go to the mat. And remember my little line there? The real estate market is like the stock market. It's unpredictable. So I can't promise you it will sell for this price, but what I can promise you is I'm going to do everything in my power and I'm going to keep you informed. So if at all is said and done, you've now decided this isn't a good business decision. This is not a listing I should take. Then don't take it. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I respect you enough to tell you the truth. And I'd much rather turn your listing down now than let you down later. So I'm going to need to decline the listing unless you're willing to reconsider the price where we would begin at. And if they say no, you say, well, I'm sure another agent is going to tell you that they'll take it at that price. My suggestion might be, then make them live up to it. Don't give them an adjustment. And maybe you don't even give them a long listing. If they're doing a great job, you can always extend it. If they're not doing a great job, then you can get done with them and call me back. And I hope you'll remember, again, that I respected you enough to tell you the truth. Should you decide to price it where it will need to be to sell, please know the door is open. I'd be happy to help. Okay, so just because we turn it down doesn't mean that we can't turn it down graciously and pre-frame them to contact you if they're unable to get the home sold. So only take it if it's a good business decision. Okay, so let me take a look at a couple quick questions here. Let's see. Melissa says, as a newer broker, it's harder to turn something down. And you know, Melissa, I totally agree. And sometimes when you're newer to the business, you just want to have a listing that you can work, that you can door knock around, that you can have open house. I totally get it. Only thing I'd caution you on is if they demand a lot of expensive marketing or they're going to make you miserable, because then that might stop you from going out and hunting another more valuable listing. Ashley says, what about luxury properties that have no data? How long do you wait before suggesting a price reduction? Well, that depends a little bit on the market. However, guys, I would say that 3 weeks is a good timeline to say, we need to take a serious look at this. So, excuse me for a sec, guys. So if it's not a luxury or ultra luxury property, you really should be getting that first adjustment in 2 to 3 weeks if the market's not responding. With a luxury property, it's going to be a little bit of case by case, but I would say at a minimum, every 30 days, you're going to want to sit down with them and really examine what's happening, the market response, and have that heart to heart with them. Okay. So once it's listed, set the expectations. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, guys, because I want to get on to some other things. This is the script that we're going to send you. So you can see I give you verbatim what to say. So I want you to be thinking about this. You do your listing presentation, you get that listing signed, and this is part 2. Take the listing, put it in your bag or briefcase. Now you look them in the eye and you say, now that we're business partners, let's talk about what you can expect to happen and to happen in this market. Okay. Now, I think we have a little typo there, and it's probably because I threw changes at Samantha at the last minute. So I'm not even sure what that means other than over prepare them and over communicate. Okay, so I want you to be speaking to them at least once a week. So 2 weeks to 21 days, go in for that first reduction. Themes for seller calls. You know, when you're going to make your calls to your sellers, you're going to want to be well prepared. You're not going to necessarily talk about a price adjustment every single call. So what are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about condition? Are you going to talk about feedback? Are you going to give them an update on the marketing? Have they been a little uncooperative with showings and you need to have that conversation? Are you going to discuss possible bonuses or incentives that they might want to offer? Are you going to give them a market update of recent sales or new competition? So I used to gather all my sellers together, and every Tuesday afternoon, I would call through the list because it gave me a chance to get prepared, to get psyched up, to have themes ready for each conversation, because I want to go into that conversation proactively. I want to go into that conversation with power. So have your plan ready. Now you're going to get some common objectives of this. Can't say it. Objections. Be ready, right? You're going to get the same ones over and over and over again. So be ready. Now, one thing that often comes up is they'll tell you, I don't have to sell it. I don't want to reduce it. I don't have to sell it. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, then maybe you shouldn't. May I ask you, what are your other options? Because see, guys, you got to remember, sometimes when they're telling you, I don't have to sell it, that's a bunch of baloney, right? They're just trying to negotiate with you. But maybe they do have other options. Don't jump on them. Try to stay in rapport. Okay, well, maybe we shouldn't sell it. And if you choose not to, I understand. Tell me, what are the other options you're considering? Well, I might rent it out. Okay. Do you own other rentals currently? No. All right. May I ask, if you were to rent it, would you still need cash out of it for your next move? Well, yeah, we're going to need cash out of it. Okay. So if you were to borrow cash out of it, would you have a negative or a positive cash flow? Well, I don't know. I guess maybe a negative cash flow. Okay. Are you okay with that? Well, maybe. All right. That's fine then. No problem. I can connect you to a lender if you'd like to speak to someone about a refinance. Let me ask you something else, though. You know, sometimes tenants don't pay. So if you happen to get into a situation where a couple of months of non-payment and then you had to evict them and repair the property, can you do that? Would that place a hardship on you? Well, yeah, maybe. No, that wouldn't be good. Okay. Well, one last question. If you were going to rent it out, how long would you want to hold it before you'd like to try again? Well, a year. Okay, but at the end of a year, you'd really want it sold? Yeah, at the end of the year, we'd have to have it sold. Well, then let's think about something together. So if you rent it, you're not going to get it back in the same condition that you left it. It's just probably not going to happen. And you're going to have to evict the tenant. It's going to be empty, no income. You're going to have a higher payment because you borrowed money out. You're going to have to do the work to get it repaired. Then you're going to need to sell it, and it's still empty all of this time. And unfortunately, we're in a shifting market. So the values a year from now may not be anything close to where they are today. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you can do whatever you choose. As your real estate professional, though, it doesn't sound like renting it is the best option, is it? See, get in dialogue with them, guys, and don't forget, sometimes they just say things because they think that's going to push your buttons or that's going to make you work harder. Well, I'm not reducing it. Guess what? They do. I tell our agents all the time that we're coaching, if you're going to keep it, keep asking, because most of them eventually do adjust it. Script for original owners with tons of equity. I remember this older couple. Steve, you remember the Grant Park track off of South Street in Carmenita? I used to farm there, and they were an older couple. They'd paid like, I don't know, $26,000 for their home. And at the time, I forget what it was selling for, but I'll give you an example. I know the house. So today it'd be like $850,000. So I'm sitting there with them, and let's say it's worth $850,000 and they want, $1 million. And I'm saying, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's think back. You paid $32,000 for this home when you bought it. If someone then had ever told you that it would be worth over $800,000, would you ever have even thought that was possible? I mean, it's crazy, right? What a great investment you made. What a good job you did. And I know you're disappointed that we can't get $1 million. I understand that. Let me share something with you, if I may. What was your payment when you guys bought the house? Wow, that's incredible. Do you know that if the buyer bought your home today, their payment's probably going to be around $4,000 a month? I know it's a lot, right? I mean, gosh, would you pay $4,000 a month to live here? And do you know how much the buyer would need to make to qualify? They'd need to make X, whatever that is, 150,000 plus or whatever, right, guys? So I'm curious, do you have a lot of friends or family members that could do that? I know. You see, that's our dilemma. That's our dilemma. And that's exactly why we have to be in that right price range so that little pocket of buyers that can afford to buy your home see the value and buy it. Because you see, in a shifting market, we can't be chasing the market down. In a shifting market, this conversation really is all about protecting the equity that you have left. So we need to do the right thing. We need to make the adjustment today. See, guys, remember, it's like you're the doctor and they're the patient. I'm watching the time because I want to cover as much as I can, but I got to tell you this quick story because it will really help you, I think, with your mindset. One of our clients, he's in a market that's kind of a resort market, and it's always a little tough to sell there. They're very expensive properties, waterfront, sometimes there's hurricanes, all kinds of crazy things. And he said to me, oh God, I was telling my brother that I hate these price reduction conversations, how horrible it is. And he said, my brother looked at me and said, Randy, wait a minute. Do you forget what I do for a living? See, his brother was an oncologist, or is an oncologist. His brother's point was, Randy, every day I have to tell people that they're sick or dying of cancer. All you have to do is tell somebody their house is overpriced. Grow up, do your job. And Randy said, wow, that was a really good reminder. This is my job. This is why I get paid the big bucks. I'm the doctor. They're the patient. Tell them what they need to do. Well, why haven't you shown my home? Best defense, good offense. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I wish I could have shown your home. In fact, that's why I'm calling you today. With all of the efforts I've made, the fact that we've had 1,500 online previews and yet not one buyer has reached out to me and been willing to look at the property. And that's exactly why we need to adjust the price today. I'm not going to give it away. I don't blame you. I wouldn't either. And then we go back into talking about the stats, the market. And I think, guys, the best motivator is fear. If they don't get ahead of this, it's going to sell for less. I'll just wait for the market to improve. Well, we could do that. I don't know, though. I'm just curious, what data, Mrs. Seller, have you seen that would indicate that that's happening? Because actually the things I'm studying are indicating that we're in a different type of trend. No one has a crystal ball, and yet we appear to be going into a down cycle. And then we've already done the one, right, of maybe I'll just rent it out. Maybe I should list with someone else. Yeah, if I were you, I might be wondering the same thing because, of course, we'd like to have an easy solution. Let's review everything I've done to sell the home. Is there anything you feel I've missed? Right? So, guys, don't get angry. Don't be offended. Just know they're really emotional. That's why you want to track all the exposure, all the things you've done to sell the property so that you can prove you've done your very best. So I'm insulted by this offer. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know it's not what you were hoping for. And yet, if you're going to be insulted, I guess we should really be insulted by all the people that looked online, didn't come over, those that came over and didn't make an offer. At least they're making an attempt to work with us. Let's give them a counter, right? So keep them calm, guys. Just remember, it's very emotional. And guys, I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to have to handle this one for you later. Just remember, though, don't attach your commission to a price reduction. You know, you're professional. You don't do that. So we'll work on that later. Show them all their competition. Tell them and show them all you've done to sell the property. Be strong. Be clear in your recommendations. Ask for their permission to tell them the truth. And let's remember, get all parties on the call so that you can discuss the reduction with everyone. And if they don't give you a reduction, request an extension, okay? And look for other ideas and opportunities that might, in addition to price, help sell the property. And we can talk about this on another webinar. And just remember too, if you're going to keep it, it's your job to keep asking them to do what they need to do. And it is not your fault. The market is just not accepting their price. And our patients aren't dying. They just think they are, right? So be diligent, do the best you can for them, but don't be overly attached to the outcome. So guys, let's look at what we've learned so far very quickly. 3 pricing strategies. We're going to send you the webinar so you can go back through those. How to set that expectation. You're going to get that script. Scripts to approach and obtain reductions. You'll be able to go back and replay this audio. So I hope you have your 2 to 3 action items. So if you do, type yes into that chat box, right? And I hope you feel this time was well spent. And please type in response to us. I'd love to know your action items. If there's questions we didn't have time to cover, let me know. I see the yeses coming in. Patrick, Lauren, Carol, Monica, everybody's saying yes, yes, yes. Got great stuff. So guys, I'm confident that you more than most will go out and put this into action. But guess what? What if there's a better way? What if we could stand behind you and help you? And I know you've got good intentions, but sometimes we just don't take the actions. So in addition to accountability, I would love to help you with a high level strategy to make your business run more efficiently. So if you want to know if it's time to hire a coach, just type in the chat box, send me the report. Okay. It's not a hard sell. It's a very informational piece that helps you review, is coaching even right for you? And remember, I told you at the beginning, I set aside 5 spaces in my schedule for next week to talk to those of you who are serious about examining if coaching is right for you. So if you have an interest, it's very simple. It's complimentary. www.businessstrategycall.com. And here's what will happen. That will take you directly to a link in Taylor's calendar. My daughter, Taylor, president of the company, she will call you and spend about 10 minutes with you. And she's going to gather the questions you have, what's happening in your business, what advice you need from me. And then she's going to schedule a call for us. And on that call, I will answer your questions about coaching. I will give you some tips on your business. And at the end, I think you'll know if coaching is right for you or not. But again, remember, I have limited space. So this is truly for those of you who would like information about whether or not it's time to get some help from us. And I hope what we did today was helpful. Alex, thanks for your comment. Go implement. All right, guys, have a great day. And the gifts will be on the way soon. And reach out on the www.businessstrategycall.com right now. And Taylor will get in contact with you right away. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye-bye.